Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Happier Active podcast. My name's Ellie, and this week I was talking to Lisa Foster, who does craniosacral therapy. This wasn't something I knew a huge amount about going in, and it was a really interesting conversation, and Lisa was extremely generous explaining stuff to me and answering all my questions. So if it's something you're interested in, I think this will be a really beneficial episode to learn more about it and get a better feeling for what might happen if you wanted to try craniosacral therapy. I definitely found it incredibly interesting and have booked but not yet been to an appointment because I thought it sounded like something that I definitely wanted to try, and I hope lots of you get that out of it as well, and I can't wait for you to listen. As usual, I'd love to hear any feedback you have, or if you want to be on the show or know anyone, or there's an area that you'd like me to talk to someone in. You can reach out to me. All of my contact details are in the show notes, or I'm Happier Active on Instagram, and I'm pretty good at responding to DMs. I can't wait for you to hear it. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Happier Active podcast. There are lots of ways to find your path to better health and happiness, and what works for each person is pretty individualized. So my philosophy is that most people are more likely to find that if they're active participants in their own journey. So this is a space to start exploring some of the rich and varied areas in which people practice, so that you can start thinking about what resonates with you and discover new or different practices to start or deepen your own health practices. And so today I have Lisa Foster from Mapleton Craniosacral. So she's going to talk about craniosacral therapy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I am the owner of Mapleton Craniosacral Therapy, and most people say like, what is craniosacral therapy? Like, no one really knows what it is, and if people know what it is, I feel like no one knows how to explain what it is. So I'm going to try to do that for you.
Great.
So craniosacral therapy, I love it. It's such a gentle manual therapy. It's a hands-on therapy. So unlike things like Reiki, it's actually hands are on. And basically we're working with all the structures that surround the nervous system. So everything from the cranium and the spine and the sacrum, which is where you get craniosacral, like the name isn't that, creative.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all the stuff that's inside that. So it's the spine itself, it's the nerves, it's the membrane that surrounds your brain, it's the brain, it's everything that is within and surrounds the nervous system. And what we're really doing is we're trying to balance the nervous system, since that's the foundational system in our body. If that's balanced, then all other systems can work more optimally off of that. And then a person can rest, relax, and heal. And so I still feel like sometimes people are like, what is it? And so the other way to explain it would be our bodies are meant to heal, right? We know that you get a cut, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it's gone. Like the next day, we don't do anything. But sometimes that cut's too big and you need stitches. And then the body heals, and that's amazing as well. So I think the craniosacral therapist is kind of like the stitches, where we support the body and then the body's able to do
Mm-hmm.
what it needs to do to heal. So that's kind of what I do. And what's great is I get to see clients of all ages. It's so gentle. So I do work with even newborns all the way through seniors, and with a
Wow.
huge variety of diagnoses. So everyone has a different story that they need to tell. Everything that in our environment and in our body can affect on how we're healing, and sometimes blocks the path to healing. So if you treat one person with a migraine, then it's going to be different with somebody else, because their background, their story, their lifestyle all plays a part in that. So did that explain a little bit about what
Yeah,
craniosacral is?
really interesting. And I've actually been reading a lot in the last couple of weeks about, chronic stress in the kind of modern time, and how people are often, their like fight or flight is activated almost all of the time. And so finding ways to reduce that, and that can, because then that has the knock-on effect on, gut health and nutrition. And lots of people who, come and talk to me and say, oh, my exercise, what I'm doing isn't working for working out, but it's often because they're so stressed that their body can't get any good out of anything else they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. You said it. when our body is in fight or flight, right? Because our nervous system is meant to help us survive, right?
Hmm.
And when it's in this survival state, and you're right, we're in it all the time. It doesn't know if we're being chased by a bear or if we're just stressed out by our kids or work, right? It's the same
Hmm.
response. And you're right. One of the things that shuts down when our nervous system is that fired up is our gut and our immune system. Because when you're running and
Mm.
fleeing, those things that you don't need. Like if you're not going to survive, you don't need your immune system. You don't need to digest, right? You need to run, and those things are sent to those other areas so it can increase our heart rate and blood flow and get us going, right? So you're right. So gut is a
Hmm.
huge thing that shuts down, and that's where you see people, not to be gross, but like you have constipation and diarrhea. Those are signs that your gut is not healthy, right? So yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And we're a society that's really in that stress response a lot. And once again, when the nervous system's more balanced, all other systems are going to work more optimally. So yeah, if you're going to go work out and, get stronger, well, you need to be in a place that your body can respond to that.
Yeah, and I think I one of the things that I think a lot of my clients struggle with is that trying to get calm and finding what works for them to do that. And a lot of them find, because they'll say things about meditation, but actually, if you've never done that, and I'm starting to work on meditation as a thing, and I find it very challenging. And so finding other things that I can do first to get my sort of baseline down before I can even get to being able to sit still for 10 minutes. So these kind of things are really interesting because they kind of help do that.
Yeah, it can really help connect you into your own body. So exactly,
Hmm.
it's hard to sit still and meditate and feel comfortable in a body that's just uncomfortable. So if you can get comfortable with whether it's like a craniosacral practice, or there are a lot of practices that probably can do that as well. Yeah, that's a big thing. If you can get more comfortable in your own body, then like sitting still in meditation becomes more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. So how did you get into the craniosacral? Because I saw that you were a physical therapist originally.
Yeah. So I'm still a physical therapist, but I don't really practice traditional PT.
Hmm.
And I started in the pediatric realm. So I was pediatric
Oh
physical
wow.
therapist. I worked a lot with kids with autism.
Hmm.
And I had a coworker who was doing cranial sacral with kids with autism. And I was like, huh, those kids are just relaxing and they're lying on this mat, and they're doing better. Their behavior's better, their speech and language are better, they're more focused. And I'm running around the room with my kids who are not getting better. I'm just going to say that. And I'm like sweating and I'm not getting the results. And so I was like, what are you doing? Is basically what I said.
Yeah.
And, he told me he was doing craniosacral work and he explained it. And honestly, like to me, I'm originally from New York. I'm pretty skeptical. And I was
Hmm.
like, what is that? Like, that seems a little out there. It's so gentle. How could this possibly work? And so I decided to say, okay, my curiosity was still there. So I was like, it's worth a try. Let me go take a course. We have continuing ed courses. Let me go take that first course and see. And
Yeah.
so it was at that first course, I think my mind was blown because so I went to the course and I paid really good money for this course, and I wanted to make sure I felt this cranial rhythm, which is this
Hmm.
gentle flow that you feel in the system. So I was determined to do this. I had a partner on the table and I put my hands on her body and I closed my eyes, ready to feel this magic. And I got so angry because it felt like she was jumping all around the table, like almost like tricking me a little bit to be like, I don't know. And so I just had my eyes closed and I said, "Listen, can you stop moving because I need to feel this?" And she's like, "Open your eyes. I'm not moving." And I was like, "What is that?" And that for me, that was the first time I ever experienced something that I couldn't see, but was obviously there. And so I was like, "Okay, I have to learn more about what's going
Hmm.
on in here." And so that kind of got me hooked. I took that first class. I was a big migraine sufferer. And I also, had two miscarriages and I was trying to get
Hmm.
pregnant again. And within a month, my migraines felt better and I was pregnant. So it could be all a coincidence. However, cranial helps with
Yeah.
both of those things. And yeah, and I just became a believer and I just decided, okay, let's keep going. I continued on, got certified, keep taking courses to this day, and now opened up my own practice, really just doing
So
craniosacral
interesting. And
therapy.
it is amazing how many different, applications, because I guess essentially it's stress or managing that nervous system. And then that has so many different things it can help with. For
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, right? Like pain is kind of our body's communication, whether it's a headache or back pain or neck pain or gut issues. It's like our body's way of talking to us, right? So it's like craniosacral therapy, I feel like, is a way that we can really tune in and deeply listen to
so
the body.
interesting. I've started doing a lot more breath work, which I find super helpful. I actually have someone coming on to talk about, how to kind of deepen that. But it's funny, like even just getting better at doing the breath work when sometimes now I'll notice that I've started doing it before, like unconsciously, because my anxiety spiked. And before I've almost like consciously noticed the anxiety, my body almost knows like, oh, now we do the breathing. And that's made so much difference to like
That's
so
amazing.
much of like day to day, because you just bringing yourself down, more often, which I guess I read on your website that that's
Yeah.
something you encourage people to do.
Yeah, breath work is huge, and it is something because craniosacral is such a hands-on, therapy. It's a little hard to give people,
Yeah.
something to do at home. And breath work is definitely something I always recommend because what it does, it can do a few things, right? It can actually decrease you from going in this sympathetic, that fight or flight, to a parasympathetic, more of a rest and digest stage. And it's also, I mean, we can even see it. Like people are like, breath, whatever. But it's so true because when you exhale twice as long as you inhale, it actually stimulates the system to go into more of a parasympathetic system. And if you put like a blood pressure cuff on you, you can see it. Put a blood pressure cuff, take your pressure, do about 5 to 10 breaths just like that, not being anxious about your blood pressure. That's a whole other story, right? But if you're relaxed, it will come down, like literally. So it just shows how quickly it works and that it is affecting our nervous system, and we can actually see the change. The other thing I really like about it is for the cranial work, a lot of times the membrane system in around our nervous system that really protects us, it
Yeah.
does get very tight and like not so flexible. And the breath work actually really relaxes at the membrane
Interesting.
level. So it can actually relax that tightness. And that really helps keep some of the things that you are gaining from your craniosacral sessions and just in general in life. It's healthy. It brings health to the system. So it's so powerful and so easy. And I always say it's like, it's free, it's portable, you can do it
Yeah.
anytime. Like, why not? Why not do it? And people don't even need to know that you're actually, everyone's breathing, right? Like, you don't have to over exaggerate. You can do it just like you said. It all of a sudden comes on and you don't even know it. You've just trained your body in those states to do it. So yeah, I second your motion.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
So
And so
important.
what would, like, if I came in to have a session, like what would that look like?
Yeah, it's basically it's super easy. What I like is that you're still fully
Yeah.
clothed. Like for me, I like being fully clothed. And I think a lot of trauma patients too. I see a lot of people who have trauma, and they, getting undressed is a lot. It's very vulnerable. Other people don't care about that, but you are fully clothed. You lay on a table, looks like a massage table. You're laying on your back, and basically it's just the weight of my hands or your therapist's hands along your whole system. So probably starting at the sacrum, you're kind of where your bottom is, then it goes up to your belly and your chest, and then to your head. And the craniosacral therapist is just touching these areas and really following what your body already likes. So, unlike traditional PT, if I had restrictions
Mm.
on my ankle, right? I didn't have enough range of motion. What we would do is like, let's push against it and stretch out the system. With craniosacral, we're working with the nervous system. So if you think about it, why would I push the
Mm.
nervous system, right? Like, what is it going to do? It's going to protect. So we don't want to push against anything, but instead we kind of follow the system. So we follow the patterns that the person already likes. And then what happens is we're kind of holding space. We use this gentle technique. And then as it relaxes, it forms a better, new, more healthier pattern, balancing your nervous system. So that's basically what you're doing. For the person on the table, some people are very sensitive and they can
Mm-hmm.
feel everything. They can feel shifts kind of happening. They might feel pulsing or hot or cold, big heat releases. Other people just feel relaxed. I have a lot of people who just fall asleep, honestly, on my table,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine too. That works. Because it is, we're
Yeah.
relaxing the nervous system. So rest is part of, moving into that parasympathetic system and relaxing. So, yeah, so that's basically what people will feel. And then I always like to say, we all have stories that have happened in our lives. It's part whatever environments we've grown up with, any small traumas, big traumas, they're also
Mm-hmm.
in our tissue too. So craniosacral will release everything in the system. So with that, you can also feel
Mm.
emotions, in the system as well. Like you might feel happy, sad, angry, whatever it is. It's not uncommon for someone to say, wow, it's so weird. I keep thinking about this incident. I haven't thought about it in years. I'm totally over it. And what I always say to that is that, yeah, because the tissue might still hold on to it. Like you may have cognitively worked through it, even gone to therapy, but for some reason it's
Mm-hmm.
still in the tissue. And so as we're working through, it's releasing as well. And these are good things. And so I always tell my clients, whatever happens in cranial stays in cranial. It's
Yeah.
like Vegas, and that I'm here to support you and you are in a safe place to, release everything because we don't want
Yeah.
it in our tissues. And there are some times that we may have had a big injury. Maybe I see a lot of concussion patients, and some heal really well, and some are like struggling for like years. And sometimes it's an emotional piece that's actually holding them back from fully
That actually
healing.
makes. So I have a recurring shoulder injury that always happens, and now it's like a sign that I'm stressed because I guess I hold a lot of tension in my shoulder when I'm stressed out. But that's really interesting because I've done so much PT, but because it is like now a stress injury when it wasn't originally, I wonder if that is something to do with that where I'm holding because it's always on this side, not on that side.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's possible that you might be
Mm.
holding something, that's kind of blocking the way
Yeah.
from fully healing. Or that, yeah, exactly. It's kind of that weak point. So your stress just kind of goes
Yeah.
right to it. So yeah, doing some work to kind of once again balance your system out so
Yeah.
it's not always thrown over that shoulder,
It's
if
like
you
an
will.
early
Could
morning
be
system. One morning I'll
helpful.
wake up and be like, oh, this shoulder's quite high again. Relax.
Yeah, see, our bodies, they
Yeah.
don't lie. I love when people come in and they don't like tell me something, and I'll be like, huh, this is interesting. Like I'm like feeling something here, like whatever it is. And they're like, oh, well, I didn't tell you, but, and I was like, the
Mm.
body doesn't lie. Like it's going to hold those emotions. It's going to hold, you might have like tucked it down. We can
Mm-hmm.
stuff things down out of our conscious mind. We can easily do that. However, the body knows and it'll hold on to it and it just wants to keep going. So it's going to build around it. And that's not always
No. And I
healthy.
think it's interesting that with especially trauma where people have been holding it and then it comes out in other ways. And I know that so when I went to trauma therapy a few years ago, I've never really known how to deal with anger. But so I would get really angry about, if something was late or like road ragey type anger. but never about real things that you probably should be angry about. And I didn't know how to like, it was almost like learning a new emotion at like 30. And I think that's where you just hold it all in, and then it comes out in weird places. And then it's only when you start dealing with all this kind of stuff that you're like, oh, you're holding on to it in all these weird places that you think are fine.
Right. And it can make you more reactive, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you said, road rage, right? Like, so it's like, once again, if you fill up your resource bucket in your body and then that
Yeah,
thing
my
happens,
husband would be like, why are you
it
so
like
mad that the
explodes,
delivery's
right?
late? And I'd be like, I couldn't like explain. Because he'd be like, obviously it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then like something actually bad
Yeah,
would happen, and he'd be like,
exactly.
why are you not mad about that? I don't understand. I think when you learn to like hold all these things in, and then I guess you're tense all the time, so like learning how to relax is so important for healing.
Yeah, and I feel like that word like could be stressful for people, like learning how to relax. Like it's almost if I relax, I'm
Mm-hmm.
dropping all my balls and I won't keep it together. And I'm here to say that's not true. We just have to like, we have to learn how to trust ourselves, trust our body. And that's some deep work, right? Like it's not okay, let's go to a sacral session and
Yeah.
be done. It's probably multiple therapies, but yeah, but that's like deep work, but important work, to learn that like, listen, if I let go, I'm not going to fall apart. I think that's a
Yeah,
big
and it's
thing for
very
people.
difficult. I think I do like a challenge each month and this January I'm doing rest and recovery, and people find that so challenging. I've had so many people be like, I just can't do it. And like, even saying for exercise, gentle, so like not going above, zone 2 in your heart rate, trying to not give yourself DOMs, like no going heavy, just do what's your baseline, manageable, and doing meditations. And people find it so difficult. And I think especially in January when they have all this pressure to do New Year's resolutions and all that sort of stuff, even though it's winter, it's like you should be resting. Holidays are, you've come off normally a
Yeah.
pretty busy time for people.
Right. Isn't winter supposed to be the
Yeah.
hibernation month, right? So we're supposed to be resting.
Yeah.
It's like in nature, right? And so, yeah, we are. But it is hard. I have a client, it was funny because I told her about breath work, and
Mm-hmm.
she has some other therapists that also are recommending meditation. And she's like, oh, taking the time to slow down to do the work gets me just agitated. Like it
Mm-hmm.
increases her stress, right? Because she's like, I should be doing all these other things. And I said, well, then maybe, because
Mm-hmm.
I believe in doers. I know, like, I used to be a real big doer as well. And it is hard to slow down and make the time. I said, well, then put it in your day, because you can breathe anytime. I'm like, one thing I personally hate doing that I feel is like a time waster, but I know I need to do it, is fill my water bottle. Those things
Oh,
fill so
yeah.
slowly from the fridge, right? Like you're like forever. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta make lunches. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. I'm like, let me just fill this water bottle. So now I always take my breaths
Oh,
during that time. I can get 5 to 10 breaths by the time my water bottle's filled. I've done my breath work. I'm more calm and I got it in, right? And I filled my water bottle without being stressed out because I should be doing something else because I hate
that's
having it
so
there.
good.
Oh, just like add it into your already. And so it's less stressful, but you're still doing it
Yeah,
and
that's
you're getting the
such a good
benefits.
little bit of advice. And I really relate to that. Like I find it hard to sit still. And so for me, slowing down has to be very intentional. I have to really force it. And I do see the benefits, but then it's hard to remember because then you get caught up in being busy and doing all this stuff. And I've got a toddler, so there's always stuff to do. Never a minute to sit still if you don't want there to be. So you mentioned a bit earlier about the starting because of kids with autism and that regulating, which I just found that's really interesting in terms of I've just started going to yoga with my daughter, and like seeing kids or ways you can teach kids sort of mindfulness and breath work and that sort of thing from early seems to be helpful. But I just wonder about what you've done with kids then. That's so interesting.
Oh, I love working with kids. And I love working
Mm.
with teens, especially actually. But I see infants all the way
Hmm.
through, adults. And I feel like kids do so well. It's amazing how well they do it. Parents will always come and say, like, okay, I have a 4-year-old. I don't think they're going to sit on this table, you know,
Hmm.
or my kid's, has autism. I don't know how you're going to get them to sit still. And I'm saying, so I say to them, I was like, well, we don't then, like, I just meet the child where they are because if you want to be craniosacral therapy is all about being safe and comfortable. That's where you're going to work with the
Hmm.
system the best, right? So if a child is told to like stay still and not move, well, that's not normal for them. So I let them be comfortable. Sometimes they're sitting, sometimes they're laying, sometimes they're listening to a story, maybe their parents reading them a story. I also allow them if their system doesn't get elevated, meaning like while I'm on it, it stays open, it's feeling relaxed, then they can watch something. That's fine. I had one kid who had autism or has autism, and it was so funny because I'll play like gentle music in
Yeah.
my office, right? Which is nice for me and for probably
Hmm.
85% of the clients, right? But a lot of kids know it's not. It actually irritates their system, which I found out because the kid kept asking for Kid Bop, which is like this kid, hot, like top hits kind of thing and rappy
Yeah.
and fast paced. And I was like, no way, we are not playing Kid Bop. But then I just said, well, okay, my whole thing is like meet the kid where they are. So what I decided to do is say, let's play it and see what happens. And if it's too much, we'll take it off. So he totally relaxed to the point where he actually lay
Oh my
down and fell
goodness.
asleep during the session, which he never would do because his system needed something more to
Hmm.
feel calm, you know? And so it's not my job to judge anyone. What's good for my system might not be good for everybody's system, but I can actually feel and determine that. So if someone asks, I usually say, let's try. And if it doesn't work, let's take it, then we won't do it. But if it does work, if they're feeling safe and comfortable, they're going to have a much better session than if they're not. But we see a lot of great results. Kids respond really well because they're a lot more
Hmm.
open to things. They don't have all this judgment or,
Hmm.
skepticism. And, they're just so much more open. So they're ready and they know if it's working or not. You know, they will ask for it actually. Like, when am I coming back for my cranial, for that, like, and they don't call it cranial, they'll call it something else, but like that session thing where I get to sleep and watch a show, or whatever it is, because they feel it and parents see a difference. I have a lot of kids that come for
Hmm.
behavior stuff where they're very reactive and, and they're not having those full blown reactions because it's almost like we've reset their system so that they have more space. If something happens that's going to set them off, they have more space and resources in their system so they don't just go right into that rage, so that's a big one that we see. But yeah, the kids have so many benefits from it. Stress is one. Like, I love treating like middle schoolers. That's a
Yeah.
stressful time, and they don't get to talk to people about it. And I also feel like craniosacral therapy, yeah, there can be some dialoguing with it, but a lot of times there isn't. And it just gives a child or someone who doesn't want to have to like talk through every single thing a way to get it out of their system, out of their bodies without having to kind of go through every step. And they feel just so much more grounded and relaxed after that. It's so helpful, especially since a lot of times they don't even know what they're feeling at that age in middle school, right?
Mm.
Or high school. There's just so much stress at that age for these kids, and they don't have as many outlets that as adults do, right? We can say, okay, it's time for us to go see a therapist or have friends to talk to, or at least identify it. But the kids don't, and they're just kind of told, like, let's push through. Go, oh, nope, I know you're having a hard time at school, but let's just go to school. You have to go to school, or you have to go do this, or you have, like, they're just, these poor things are just being switched around everywhere, and
Yeah, and
it's
I also
hard.
think at that age it's often not necessarily safe to talk to people because you don't know how they're going to react, and then you're still
Yeah.
stuck at school. So if you tell the wrong person, they tell everyone or make you feel bad about it. So they don't even necessarily have those outlets that we as adults have because we can pick and choose who we spend time with and how we conduct our relationships.
Yes,
That's
totally.
so interesting. I can really imagine that for that age. It's really tough. So if someone's interested in doing this kind of work, what's like ways they can like prepare, or do they just dive straight in?
Yeah. So for a patient, yeah, they just book a session. I mean, most therapists work the same. They don't need to prepare at all because I feel like our bodies are like onions, it has layers. And in a cranial session, you'll hit the layer that your body needs and is ready for that day. So, for people who are like, oh my God, I have so much in me that I'm kind of nervous to uncover it all, your body just naturally knows who and what it needs to do that day. So it's not like a therapist is going to open up all these boxes for you. It's layers. It'll probably be a little bit more superficial, get the structural level kind of down first. And then, okay, oh, there's some sensitivity in here. It feels a little emotional. We'll dive a little deeper, but it might take a few sessions to get to those deeper levels. Some people are open books and they're ready and they come in that first session and a lot really occurs. So it's really everybody's different, but know that your body, once again, going back to that, cut on your hand, it knows what it needs. It knows how to heal. It just needs some help and support. So it's going to kind of let it out in a fashion that is a good speed for you, if that makes sense. And having, I think, craniosacral therapists, one thing we're really trained to do is to listen to the body and stay absolutely neutral. Meaning that we don't put our own intention. Of course, I want everyone to do well. I want everyone to heal, but I also know it's this person's journey and not my own. And so when I'm in a session, I am there for you and you only, without my intention. You leave and nothing happens, that's what you needed that day. You leave and everything happens, that's what you needed that day. It has nothing to do with me. You are the most important person and I'm here to support you. And most craniosacral therapists, I would say, have the same training and are there to be this neutral zone for you to be able to express yourself in the way you need that day.
Yeah, that's so good. And that kind of comes back to a bit what I was saying at the beginning about it's not always just finding the practice that works for you, but also like the person. A lot of it, because this stuff is so... When I was pregnant, I actually did IVF. So it's like a very medicalized way in. And so and I had quite a high risk pregnancy that was also, so it was very medicalized as the doctor all the time. And so I was really keen to try and have as unmedicalized a birth as possible, but in a hospital because of the risk. So I was looking for a doula to try and help a bit with that. And it was funny because when I was interviewing them, it's the same sort of thing. They've all had the same training in theory. And I spoke to lots of them, like perfectly nice women, but somehow I was like, oh, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with you being there when I'm naked or at this really vulnerable time. And you can't always exactly explain why. It's like energetic. And so I feel like with a lot of these things, it's having that kind of vibe and the therapeutic sort of relationship really helps, because then you're able to relax. And some of that's quite hard to exactly put your finger on, but it really helps.
Yeah. And I go back to trust your gut, which is, I think, a really hard thing to do. But I think our bodies, once again, are really smart. They give you signals, right? You go into a room and you're like, oh, I don't know why. I just don't feel kind of irritated. I don't feel good. This person just makes me feel itchy inside, like you just don't feel good. Whereas if you meet somebody you really jive with, right? Like you just feel happy. Like there's some like glowingness. You feel like, wow, this is great energy between us. Yeah, I can really trust you. Just trust that. Like, and then you'll find you might have to try a few people. You're right. Or, a lot of people will do just consult calls where you can call and just have a conversation and you can know from that, if you're not ready to like dive in for a session, you can just talk to somebody. And if somebody won't talk to you, okay, like don't go see them. That's number one rule. Like, if no one's going to make the time for you to actually have a conversation, then I would say probably not the person for you. But you can know a lot from just meeting somebody. And as therapists, we're the same. We want to connect
Yeah.
with our patients too. So it's okay not to pick somebody if you don't drive with them. It's like, not everybody is for everybody. And
Yeah.
most therapists also know that. Like, we've been around the block for a while, right? And there are some patients that are like, yeah, your ideal client, and there are others that aren't. And usually the ones that aren't will find somebody who's better for them. And that's okay. There's no issue. We want, as healthcare providers, we want people to get served by whoever
Yeah.
fits them. That's what we want. So doesn't matter. But yeah, I think trust your gut. We don't do that enough. Like, if you're feeling something, you're feeling it
Yeah.
for a
I work with a
reason.
lot of new mums actually, and that is something that we talk about so much because I feel like a lot of, especially first time mums, they get like bombarded with all of this stuff and what they should be doing, and they've really lost touch with how to, because they'll say like, oh, I read, but we have to do this, but it's not really working. And then you think, trying to get them to be like, well, what do you think your baby needs and what do they want? And it's so hard because, especially with social media a bit, there's so much people telling people how they should be doing things, and they've kind of lost touch with what feels right for them or what works for them. Do you think the craniosacral
Yeah.
probably helps people with their nervous system being calmer to be more in touch with that kind of part of themselves?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Because I like to think of it, when your nervous system is
Yeah.
so riled up, it's like there's like someone banging in your head all the
Yeah.
time. There's too much noise in your body to be able to feel the simple things in your body, right? If there's so much tension and so much stress, and like a lot of us like kind of keep
Mm-hmm.
looping around the same thing, like, oh God, I'm still nervous about, baby's crying, like, got to pay these bills. Wow, like it's everything's looping around, right? So who can hear
Yeah.
anything else, right? That's where the
Mm-hmm.
pause comes in, right? Taking a break and saying, okay, let me check in with myself. But yeah, I do think the craniosacral therapy can definitely help with listening and trusting yourself, because the thing about cranial is that the answers are already
Mm.
in you. They're already in the person. We just have to kind of access them. So it's not the therapist saying, okay, you need to do breath work and you need to do this and you need to do that. It's the person
Mm-hmm.
on the table, like, coming up with these things and then saying, okay, how do I maintain that? And then we could say, well, we came up with all these things that felt out of sorts. Breath work can then
Yeah.
help that, but it's coming from within that they need something. It's coming from within the answers, so they learn to then trust those little simple signals that are saying, okay, I don't want this therapist. I don't feel good about, that nighttime routine for
Yeah.
my daughter, whatever it is. And listen, there's a reason why there's like 100 different books on parenting, 100 different books on dieting, and 100 different books
Mm-hmm.
on all sorts of things, right? Finances. Look at any topic. There are 100 different ways to do it, right? And the reason is we are
Yeah.
not all the same. We are all different. So you just have to find the path that
Yeah.
resonates with you. There's 100 different ways to
Mm-hmm.
regulate your nervous system, right? So you just have to find the path that resonates with you. And that's why there's so many choices,
Yeah, and
because we're
that's
all different.
really what I try and help people do, because I really think, talking to people, I try and say, like, if someone's saying that they've got like a one size all fits approach that will work for everyone, it's like a big red flag. In the same way that you were saying someone won't talk to you might well be a bit of a red flag. Like, because everyone is different, and probably their thing works for like 60 or 70% of people, and so they get a pretty good hit rate on it. But if someone's saying it's going to work for everyone, almost certainly if it doesn't work for you, they're going to blame you, even though it might just be that it doesn't work for you, and that can feed into that kind of self-esteem loop and then not trusting yourself. And I think women really struggle with
Yeah,
that a lot,
totally.
and trying to find the right thing and the right practitioner for the right person is so much a part of that, I think.
Yeah,
Because partly you just get to
100%.
good deep work quicker if you've got that trust and that, because you're much more likely to relax into it and move forward, because you're not feeling like, oh, I'm not sure if this is right, I feel a bit
Yeah, I mean, the more open you can be with yourself and the more you trust the process, I feel like for anything, right, you're going to have better
yeah.
results, right? If you're questioning every step, you're skeptical and not sure if you want to move forward. I mean, yeah, those results are going
And
to
the
be different
skepticism,
for
I think,
sure.
is fine as long as you, because I think you said at the beginning, like when you first got into this, you were quite skeptical, and I'm quite skeptical. I guess I'm from like a family of pretty science-based people, and so as I've been getting, deep into this world of like functional nutrition and root cause stuff, and obviously a lot of it is science-based, but a lot of it is also, it's quite hard to put your finger on, but you can see that it works. And so I think approaching stuff skeptically is fine as long as you're still open within that, and you can be like, oh, I don't know if this will work for me, but I know it has worked for other people, so I'll maybe give it a try. And that's how I try and approach things that I feel a bit skeptical about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
skeptical but curious, right? Like just being open and curious to see what happens and with whatever you try. But yeah, exactly. I was totally skeptical. And like, honestly, the training that I did was really great for me because I studied through what we call the Upledger Institute for Craniosacral Therapy. And they really teach the anatomy, the science first, which for PT was really helpful. You also have to have a license to touch to be able to be trained by them. So I think that was very helpful. And then as the courses went on, was where the more energetic pieces came in, the more, let's just say woo-woo
Yeah.
for lack of better word came in. But as I practiced that stuff as well, I was then, able to kind of trust and see as I was getting better and better results, I was like, okay, I mean, it's working. Like that's the thing. It's working. People are feeling better. So it's amazing when you do like, yeah, skeptical but curious, and you start where you
Yeah.
feel comfortable. So a lot of people come to see me because they want craniosacral work, but they feel like a little skeptical, but they know I'm a PT.
Yeah.
And that helps them kind of say, okay, well, she's trained in like science, right? In more traditional pieces. So let's see. And so even though I'm doing the same craniosacral session, that makes them feel more comfortable being on the table. And then eventually they're just like, oh, whatever. It doesn't
That's so
matter.
interesting. I think like it's funny because when I started thinking about especially this like the energetic stuff, when you meet someone, if you really like them or you have a sort of instant connection, and that when you think about it is the beginnings of that. It's that kind of energetic thing that everyone has experienced, but don't think of it in that way when it comes to then therapeutic things.
Right. Exactly. We experience energy every day, right? I mean, like, listen, if you have a teenager at home, okay, their moodiness, everyone's moody in the room, right? Like, that's energy, right? Like, they're in bad mood, now you're in bad mood, but you go out with a friend for coffee and they're like, energy is great and they're happy and they're fun. Like, you feel happy and fun. You're like, I feel great, right? It's the same. That's energy, right? And there are things all around us all the time that we can't see, right? Like, you ever like sit in a room and you're doing something and all of a sudden the sun shines in and then all of a sudden you see all these floating particles that were not there before.
Yeah.
Well, they were there. They were there the whole time. We just didn't see them. The light just shined on them. You know what I'm saying? There's so much around us in the world, that, yeah, it's like, it's there and you could decide to choose to believe it or not. I do believe it. I believe it more and more with practicing and things like that. But yeah, it's pretty powerful and definitely, once again, skeptical but curious, or just try something. You just try something one day, and, give it a go, and then you see, and you're like, wow, okay, that really,
I know, and it is funny,
really
like, because if you
worked.
told me, 4 or 5 years ago that I would be able to completely change almost my whole outlook on life by basically breathing for 6 seconds, I would have thought you were crazy. But it is, so those kind of things, like, I was like, oh, well, I'll just do it to shut the therapist up. And then suddenly, like, oh, the rage is gone. Amazing.
Yeah,
Oh, it turns out.
exactly. Exactly. I know I had a client who was so funny. She had a really bad migraine, and the cranial stuff can
Yeah.
trigger stuff too. I mean, sometimes you do move through things, and she had a really bad migraine after, and I said, "Okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
I gave her a few breathing exercises to do." And she was like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna, like that's
Yeah.
not gonna work, but whatever. Like really not gonna work. She came back like a week or so later, and she's like, those breathing exercises, this is really that changed everything. I felt so much better. I'm like, okay, so I'm glad you tried it, right? Like, but it's amazing. So what I say
Mm.
is like try something before you say no, and test it yourself. Be your own science. If it works for you, once
Yeah.
again, going back to who you are, if it works for you,
Yeah.
then great. If it doesn't, then it's not for you. It's
Yeah. And
okay.
that's
That's
what I
okay.
really try and encourage when I'm coaching people is that try different things. Like if it's no point in keep trying things that haven't worked for you before. And there's so many different things you can do, and just finding, and almost the trying is quite good as well, because that can like make you more open to other things. And so even when things don't work, it's
Yeah.
data to work with. Like, okay, great. Well, so those things don't work for you. So let's try, if meditation doesn't work, journaling, or, there's all these different things you can try. But it's just the more you test them out, the more you learn about yourself. And then the more likely you are to find different things that do work. And that is,
Yeah. And it's funny. I have such a funny little story about trying. I got really into kind of
mm-hmm.
manifestation, right?
Yeah.
That's also like out there, right? Like, let's face facts, right? You put it, thoughts become things, people, right? Well, I got really into it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to try it because I listened to this whole book and stuff. And I was like, let me
Yeah.
try it. What's the difference, right? So I was out with my family, and I was like, I want a
Yeah.
free cup of coffee. I want a free cup of coffee. That's what I put out there. That's what I want. We go to Starbucks, my husband and I were going to
Mm-hmm.
get like a venti and just share it because, whatever, we're on a budget. And we go through the drive-through and we order like my favorite, which is like a mocha, cafe
Yeah.
mocha one. I was like so excited because it was the holiday and I was like going to get one. And they were like out of mocha. And I was like, oh my God, not only am I manifesting a free cup of coffee, but I'm not even getting like mocha. And they're like, but because we don't have any mocha, we'll give you a free, whatever else you want. And so we got our free cup of coffee. And I was like,
Done it.
free cup of coffee. So I was hooked, man. Not that that always happens, but I also think like sometimes thoughts, when you think about something, you also recognize it when it happens. Like I could have just had the same day happen even without manifesting, but I wouldn't have recognized I had a free cup of coffee. I would have just been stuck on that they didn't have my favorite
Yeah.
coffee, which was the mocha. Right. So it's all about, perspective, right?
So this has been really interesting. If people want to find out more, get in touch, what's the best thing to do?
Sure. So if you're interested in craniosacral therapy or just want to learn more, one of my big things is trying to
Mm-hmm.
educate people because, like I said, people don't usually know how to explain it or really know much about it. So feel free to go to my website. It's mapletonCST.com. And it has blog posts on there, some videos. If you're in Colorado and you want to make an appointment, then you can come see me. But there's a lot of also
Mm-hmm.
just information on there too, which is really
Great.
helpful. And then if you're just a podcast junkie and you want to listen to a fun podcast, I'm also the host of the Real Life Moms podcast, which is just all about prioritizing ourselves. So love our kids. But once again, self care is
Mm-hmm.
really important for moms. So it's all about our mental, physical, and emotional well being. So you can go check it out on any platform you want, or you can visit Real Life Moms with a Z,
Yeah.
MOMZ.com. And there's a lot of
Great. And I'll
information
have
on there
links to all
too.
that in the show notes as well for everyone. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
Ooh.
Thank you. This was so much fun.